example earlier this week of a person who was trying to use the appointment line to actually confirm or make an appointment. And being on hold for over 20 minutes, the 0844 or even the 01924 or 01977 numbers, if you're actually stacked for that length of time, obviously you're incurring significant cost. If she was using the lowest tariff, she would have spent over just over £1 and 10p in that time. But it is £1 and 10p that perhaps could be used for other things. And I think it just seems a bit difficult when people that perhaps are struggling with illnesses are then doing that thing, they're trying to make the contact. So if you could perhaps have a look at that in your role as a director of the Yorkshire Hospital Trust, that would be very helpful. If it's not possible, perhaps Councillor Rhodes could incorporate into the work programme. But
yeah, I'm no longer on the trust. I don't know if you are aware of that. But through meeting the challenge, a lot of these problems that the trust are having at this moment in time, they're putting proposals forward to make things better for appointment systems and that type of thing. So I hope that helps in some way, but we will also raise it at the Health and Wellbeing Board.
Councillor Rhodes. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to inform the meeting that the appointment system is indeed being looked at through the scrutiny work programme, Councillor Walsh. Thank you.
Any more questions, please? No. We move to agenda item 7C. Councillor Rowley's report can be found on pages 19 to 22. Councillor Mrs Rowley, can you speak on your report, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to refer my report. I think that the items I've listed speak for themselves, and hopefully members have read them. So I move my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowley. Are there any questions, please? Any comments? Thank you, Councillor Rowley. Agenda item 7D is the report from Councillor Stokes, which can be found on pages 23 to 27. Councillor Stokes, would you please introduce your report to Council?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you can see from the report, I have actually received correspondence from SIGOMA, which is the special interest group of municipal authorities within the LGA. I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but it is a body that this council is represented on. And they've actually provided us with data that shows that government cuts to local authorities are not being administered fairly between councils or between areas. They show a difference of £900 cut per head of population between the least and worst affected councils. It shows that the local government will have suffered cuts of over 1/3 of their budgets between 2010 and 2016. Their data shows that reductions have been disproportionate, with some councils with the highest needs and the poorest places having been hit the hardest. And with welfare reform and further cuts ahead, the poorest areas are set to suffer further. And council leaders have warned of the risk of service failures from further cuts, and that cuts at this level are actually not sustainable. And SIGOMA have now launched a campaign and an e-petition calling on the government to put a stop to the growing divide between the richest and poorest places in our society. And the link to the e-petition is actually shown on the bottom of page 27 of the council notice. And I would urge all members to log on and sign it. I've requested our trade unionists to contact their members for their support also. And the closing date for the petition is the 25th of December. They've received over 1,000 signatures initially. And if we can get 600 signatures from each of the SIGOMA local authority areas, we'll have over 25,000 signatures in addition to those that we can get from the public as well. So I would urge everybody to sign that petition. Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stokes. Are there any questions, please? Any brief comments, please? Thank you. Agenda item 7E. Next is Councillor Dagger's report, which can be found on pages 29 to 34. Councillor Dagger, can you please speak on your report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of things I'd like to add to my report. Can I say that I was delighted, along with John Wilson, the Corporate Director, and the Chief Executive, Joanne Roney, to attend the National Book Start Awards. It was their 20th anniversary, and Karen Wilkinson from the Library Service won the National Award. And can I say that Wakefield, over the last 20 years, through the Book Start programme, has given out a staggering 294,815 books to homes of babies, children and young people throughout the district. And also to mention, if I may, that it's just over 12 months since Sun Lane Leisure opened, and during that period there's been over 300,000 visits to the facility. With that, I move my report, Madam Mayor, and take any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions, please? Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Three items I'd like to refer to. On page 31, there's reference to the Wakefield Sculpture Triangle. And I don't know whether members watch University Challenge, but it was one of the questions, it formed one of the questions on Monday night to try and identify various sculptures from Yorkshire Sculpture Park. And it's the second time in this current series that Wakefield has appeared, as it were, on University Challenge. The last time wasn't the Sculpture Triangle, it was the Rhubarb Triangle. So, you know, we're getting recognition. I think it was also worth mentioning, although Councillor Dagger didn't, the White Rose Awards took place and were on television, and the Theatre Royal, although it didn't win, it was one of the highly recommended situations in the arts and cultures. But the last point that I'd like to make, Madam Mayor, again, Councillor Dagger didn't refer to it, and that was the event yesterday at Kettlethorpe High School that David Dagger set the scene for the launch of the Le Tour, the Tour de France. And we had the pleasure of the company of Gary Verity from Welcome to Yorkshire, who I have to say gave what I thought was a very inspiring speech for the young people. It was the Year 7 at Kettlethorpe High School who were present and listened to him. And he was joined by others, but most importantly, the Downing brothers, two cyclists who have done a lot for this district. And yesterday's launch of the Le Tour, as far as Welcome to Yorkshire was concerned, was really good. I'm told it featured on television at some point last night. I know David was seen, but I certainly wasn't. I was sitting at the back. But it was a very worthwhile event.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Any more questions, please? Any brief comments? Thank you. Agenda item 7F next is Councillor Mrs Cummins. Can you please introduce your report, please? Pages 35 to 41.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of items I would like to mention with the report. First of all, congratulations to Karen Morell. I'm sure you all know Karen works in our grants team. She's just run the Amsterdam Marathon and managed to raise £750 for children in need. So congratulations to Karen. Also, congratulations to James Penny, who was one of our apprentices and made it as a finalist to the APSI Apprentice of the Year Award. Unfortunately, he didn't win it, but got the recognition. And also just to thank all those members that came to the waste briefing prior to the council meeting. I'm sure you all found it very interesting. Lots of questions that were burning in the back of your minds were answered. So thank you for coming. I'm happy to circulate the PowerPoint briefing to those members that didn't actually attend. And with that, Madam Mayor, I move my report.
Thank you, Councillor Cummins. Agenda item 7G is the Cabinet Members' Report for Councillor Shaw, can be found on pages 43 to 44. Oh. I have a comment on. Right. Can you indicate clearly and in good time, please, because it's very difficult to hear.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. In terms of community participation, community involvement and speaking up for OSIT, I want to bring to the attention of members two events that were recently held in OSIT. 2nd of November, there were a Help the Heroes event held in our town hall. This was attended by the Deputy Lord Lieutenant and also services personnel. There were approximately 100 OSIT residents in attendance on that event. It was a very emotional evening, raised a lot of money and thoroughly enjoyed by all. Secondly, on the 9th of November, OSIT Civic Trust held their Gala Awards evening. Once again, it was attended by the Deputy Lord Lieutenant, the High Sheriff and also our new Madam Mayor. Thanks need to go to the organisers of the Civic Trust event. It was an absolutely wonderful evening, and everybody again enjoyed the evening immensely. Both these events were well organised, they were well attended, and it showed OSIT at the very best. And really, OSIT can be very proud. So well done. Thank you.
I'm sure it was mentioned in my report somewhere.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Agenda page 40, Street Scene Awards. I'd just like to congratulate everyone who achieved certificates and qualifications there, because I think Street Scene do a fantastic job for this authority, and I don't think they get enough praise. They maintain a high standard of cleanliness across this district, and I'd like to just say congratulations to all those in Street Scene.
Thank you, Monica. Yes, it does show the commitment of this council to actually support and help all its employees to be the best that they can. So thank you. I'll pass that on.
Councillor Walsh.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Maureen, just like to make a comment and a commendation on the Lord's Lane sting. It's really, really good to know that we're taking positive action to track down people that are doing this littering and fly tipping, and I think it's a great thing that's been done there. Is there going to be any way that we can actually publicise that a little bit more so that people are aware that we do care and actually we'll do everything we can to stop it? Second thing is about your previous video appearance on YouTube and linked to the dog fouling campaign. I think that's actually a really, really great thing. I've seen it popping up all over the place. So just a quick comment about the dog fouling campaign that you've talked about in your report. Really great news. Thank you.
Yes, favourite last. With regard to the fly tipping that you mentioned, we do our best in enforcement to actually catch those people that are fly tipping. Unfortunately, it's not one of those sexy items that the press want to take on board, but I'm sure they've heard what you've said today, and hopefully we can get some publicity across the district to say that this is unacceptable. And thank you for your comments around my video appearance. And I would imagine that not a lot of people in this room can say toxiarichisis is my friend. But I'm sure the gentleman over there who was actually the producer of that video, like to pay thanks to him. He was one of ABBA. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cummins. Agenda item 7G is the final Cabinet member from Councillor Shaw and can be found on pages 43 to 45. Councillor Shaw, can you present your report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to draw reference to the first item in my report from Kingswood. Certainly there's a lot of good work going on, and I think we've all seen in some of our areas that the food banks and a lot of families are really struggling to feed either themselves or their own children. So this is certainly an important item, and I'm sure we'll all agree that feeding the children and giving them at least one good nutritious meal not only helps with their education, but obviously helps on an ongoing system. So I'm really pleased about the initiative that Kingswood, and it is succeeding, and we'll certainly make sure that that continues. With that, I move my report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Are there any questions, please? Are there any brief comments, please?
Yes.
Where? Councillor Cumming?
I just want to say, only because you've mentioned food banks, I just want to pay tribute to those 11 food banks that we do have across the district. They're doing an absolutely fantastic job, which is a shame. You know, we are the third richest nation and we've got 11 food banks across our district, and they are growing more than planned, and they're doing a fantastic job. And I think you're quite right in that we should pay tribute to those people that are volunteers in food banks and are actually working and doing the best to actually feed those people who are less fortunate than we are.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments, please? Okay. Agenda item 8 is to consider a report reviewing the special responsibility allowance for the chair of West Yorkshire Joint Committee. This report can be found on pages 47 to 50. Is this report moved?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members will be aware that from that Wakefield in June appointed the chair of the West Yorkshire Joint Services. That's a position that's not been held by a Wakefield member since 2003. The special responsibility allowance is determined by each local authority, and the cost of that is then reclaimed from the joint authority. Our special responsibility allowance has not been increased over those 10 years because we've not held the chair, so therefore we haven't had to pay it or claim it. But particularly this year, the chair has got a large role to play in being the spokesperson at local, regional and national level. It's having to attend many meetings, briefings, subcommittees, meetings with the trade unions, and is also on call on a daily basis for policy issues, press releases and other issues that might occur. The chair will also be involved in the additional business and workload involved in actually reshaping the service. They've now been asked to deliver efficiency savings of around £1 million. The work involved has been considered by the independent remuneration panel, and the recommendation of that panel is that we pay a chair's allowance of £9,500, but that we review that in 12 months' time. So I would move that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stokes. Is this report seconded?
This report, I second the report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any comments, please? Oh, questions first, sorry. Any questions? Any comments? Okay. That is carried. Sorry, Councillor Walsh, I didn't see you there.
Put the hand up.
Thank you. Graham, I know the contents of your report. I know that in the report itself you're talking about the comparison between other authorities as well. And you say that different rates get paid in different places. When you actually look at the amounts, it varies quite a lot. I mean, if we look at the chair, if it was Kirklees Council, currently, if that was the chair wouldn't be receiving any additional payment. That's the current position with Kirklees. And at the other end of the scale, Leeds work with £12,975 when their chair is when they provide the chair for the committee. So we've got quite a spread of amounts. But what you're proposing, or sorry, I beg your pardon, what the committee has proposed, effectively is a 321% increase. What's more, it's an increase that will take that particular role beyond the level of a existing committee chairs within the council. So I'm concerned that there's a precedent starting to be developed there. I know it's due to be reviewed in a year, and I know that Councillor Lund does excellent work, but I find it very, very hard to endorse what effectively, as I say, is a 321% improvement. Is there any way that perhaps we might be able to look at making some changes within the establishment to be able to cover the cost of this? You know, either by rationalising perhaps cabinet assistant roles to free up some extra money. Have you looked at that as an option?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The payments that have been made by other authorities is much in keeping with what is actually being proposed here today. In Bradford, I know that they actually, when they had the chair, they actually paid 20% of the leader's allowance. In Calderdale, they actually paid a figure of, well, it's more than the figure that we've got here today. You mentioned Kirklees. Kirklees have never actually chaired this meeting, so they've never had to pay anything out anyway. So it's not actually part of their their responsibility allowances because they've never chaired it. And I know in Leeds they had the chair last year and they did pay an allowance, but they didn't actually reclaim it back from the West Yorkshire Joint Services. The remuneration panel have actually considered the workload and the additional workload that they've got this year, particularly with all the budget savings and the restructuring that needs to be done, and the fact that the chair will be involved on a daily basis, and they've recommended that due to the additional workload this year, that's why we're looking at the sum of 9,500. It'd be wrong to say it's a 300% increase or whatever the percentage figure was, because we haven't actually had to look at it since 2003, which is over 10 years ago. So you can't compare what happened 10 years ago with what's happening today. But the remuneration panel are also saying that because of the additional workloads, I think they would want to review it in 12 months' time. So I think the right thing to do would be to pay it now and then allow the independent remuneration panel to review it again in 12 months' time.
Thank you, Councillor Stokes. Are there any further questions, please, or comments? Right, thank you. Oh. Okay, Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know it's going to be covered in a number of other ways in this council meeting and future council meetings. But adding to the cost base in the times that we're in, it's not a great thing to do. I find it very hard to support it. I realise that probably within the chamber itself there'll be sufficient support for it, but it's not an easy thing to go with. And what I would like to ask is if at the point it comes to vote, we can have a recorded vote on it. If there's sufficient support in it.
Yes. Have we got five? Okay. What? Councillor Lund.
I'm just wondering if it would be more appropriate if I left the chamber at this time.
Yes. I would say so, yes.
Oh, it's not a responsibility. It's outrageous.
We'll take the recorded vote in 2 seconds.
Councillor Ahmed. Yes. Councillor Askew. Councillor Blizzard. Councillor Box. Councillor Broom. Councillor Bunny. Councillor Burton. Councillor Mrs Cliff. Councillor Collins. Councillor Mrs Cummings. Councillor Dagger. Councillor Dean. Councillor Mrs Drysdale. Councillor Ellis. Councillor Forster. Councillor Mrs Garbett. Councillor Graham. Councillor Halliday. Councillor Harrison.
For.
Councillor Hemingway. Councillor Mrs Heptonstall. Councillor Hopkins. Councillor Clive Hudson. Councillor Mrs Hudson. Councillor Graham Isherwood. Councillor Mrs Isherwood. Councillor Mrs Jeffrey. Councillor Johnson. Councillor Keith. Councillor Kirkpatrick. Councillor Mrs Lyles. Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Miss Loughran. Councillor Manafield. Councillor Mrs Mitchell. Councillor Morley. Councillor Miss Pickin. Councillor Mrs Rhodes. Councillor Richardson. Councillor Mrs Rowley. Councillor Ian Sanders. Councillor Bill Sanders. Councillor Shaw. Councillor Miss Sheriff. Councillor Stokes. Councillor Stone. Councillor Mrs Taylor. Councillor Dick Taylor. Councillor Tennant. Councillor Travis. Councillor Tully. Councillor Wallace. Councillor Walsh. Councillor Ward. Councillor Wassell. Councillor Miss Williams.
The recorded vote was 45 for, 11 against. So that is carried. Agenda item 9 is to consider a report to set the annual council meeting for 2014. This report can be found on pages 51 to 53. Is this report moved?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I move the recommendation that the annual council meeting is held on Wednesday, the 11th of June?
Thank you, Councillor Stokes. Is this report seconded, please?
Seconded, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any questions in relation to this report? Any brief comments? All in favour? Thank you. Any against? No. That is carried. Agenda item 10 on pages 55 to 67 sets out the proposed overview and scrutiny work programme for the 2013-14 municipal year. Is this report moved?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The proposed overview and scrutiny work programme is actually attached as part of the report at Appendix 1. And the overview and scrutiny chairs and committee agree that it's a balanced, objective and achievable work programme for the year. It takes into account existing and forthcoming national, regional and local policy and the role they play outside the council on policing and welfare arrangements. They've also actually built into it flexibility, which allows for additional items to be included as necessary. So move the work programme, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stokes. Is this report seconded?
Second the report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Are there any questions in relation to this report? Councillor Halliday. Oh, sorry. Oh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As Councillor Stokes has indicated, that scrutiny chairs make recommendations annually to Council. On the future work programme, we have a Chairs Liaison meeting, which is once a month, and we discuss the work programme which may come in or may come up with budget concerns or whatever, monthly. Good scrutiny is essential for good governance. And while making contributions to Council decisions, scrutiny is not, and repeat is not, a decision-making body. Scrutiny is also involved with the partners of the Council and providing the Executive with our findings and contributes to a better decision-making by full Council. Finally, Madam Mayor, on behalf of the 5 scrutiny chairs, I'd like to thank the scrutiny officers and everybody who's taken part in the scrutiny committees and the co-opted members especially who input what the people of the district want to input into meetings. And lastly, I'd like to thank the leader and the CX especially for her continued support of scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holliday. Are there any more comments, please? No. Can we go to the vote then? All in favour, please. Thank you. Any against? No. That is carried. Agenda item 11, which can be found on pages 67 to 81, is a report seeking Council's response to the public consultation on Phase 2 of HS2. Is this report moved?
Yes, moving the report, Madam Mayor. Members are asked to formulate a view on the environmental impact and the potential for jobs and growth around the district. We're also asking the leader to provide a decision to the government, and I've asked Peter to wind up when we finish this debate. Since the report was prepared, there are a couple of changes. On the 29th of October, it was reported that the government's latest business case for HS2 lowered the amount of benefit it predicts relative to costs. The expected benefit cost ratio was reduced from 250 to 230 in benefit for every pound spent. The new study has cut by 1/3 the value put on saving on hours, so people can get between meetings or workplaces on a quicker train to reflect the productive work is also being done while travelling. More emphasis now is being put on the benefits of providing extra capacity on the rail network. It should also be noted that MPs provided approved funding to prepare for HS2 on the 31st of October. In presenting this report, I would say that obviously I welcome investment to this area. But what is important to the Council is how the proposals will affect the lives of residents across the district. You've seen in 4.2 where the rail route travels. It travels across some of the nicest parts of our country, Winterset Country Park, Walton, and significantly in Normanton. So we have to say, is this worth the effort for us? It does have real impact on people's lives. The scheme is so very costly. For example, for £10 billion, we could improve the network across our rail network across the district, which would improve connectivity, getting people from the south to jobs in Castleford, etc., and vice versa. We could also improve the highway network and filling in potholes and do road surfacing. So again, we have to say, is it worth it for us? Is this the best investment for our area? We need to engage with government on this scheme to ascertain what are the benefits for Wakefield. Because at the moment, I don't feel that the case is made. I'm interested to hear what other colleagues have to say.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Is this report seconded?
Second the report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there any questions in relation to this report? Right, sorry, comments, yes. Councillor Cummins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Myself, Albert and Faith, who are here today, feel that our ward is going to be the biggest impacted by this, by High Speed 2. We agree with everything that the Deputy Leader has said. We don't believe the case has been made. It's going to cut across great swathes of our greenbelt land. It's going to decimate Winterset and anglers. We're not convinced, and neither are the people that we represent convinced that this is going to bring jobs and growth to our district. The money could be better spent on connectivity across and around our district, and certainly connectivity across the country from east to west. Those spiralling costs which you actually mention could be used in a better way to help the people in our district. Whilst I agree we should still be sat at the table, we should still be making our voices heard, I'm not sure that the case for Wakefield and the district of Wakefield has actually been made, and that's certainly what we're being told in Ward 5 and the people that we represent. So I welcome the recommendation within the report that all our voices and views are put into some sort of a letter from the leader of the council, but yet I still feel we should be sat at the table. The route is wrong. As you say, it cuts through swathes of our gorgeous countryside. We do have some lovely countryside here in Wakefield, and it cuts across that. There's been no environmental impact done around this project. So whilst I'm not saying I'm against it, because it could bring jobs and growth, but we've yet to be convinced that that's happening, and I would much rather, as I'm sure many of us in this room would say, would rather see that money spent on other things, the things that you've mentioned, but more so the connectivity around our district. You can get into the centre of the district, but you can't get around it. You have to come into the centre to get back out again. So I agree with the recommendation. We should still be sat at the table, but we've yet to be convinced.
Councillor Loughran.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Celia Loughran, Pontefract South. I really want to be able to give my full support to the development of HS2 in our district, but unfortunately I can't, the way it stands at the moment. HS2 is important because we need investment in our local economy so that regeneration is boosted and the life chances and opportunities for all our residents are improved. Just take one look at the statistics regarding unemployment, particularly amongst the 16 to 25-year age group. We also need it because we require better rail connections so that people can travel for work, business and pleasure, not to mention those people who want to visit us with all that we can offer, from the Hepworth, the Sculpture Park, through to the Buzz and Escape near Pontefract, and also our beautiful open countryside. So why is it that there's going to be no station in Wakefield, or the Wakefield area? We have an excellent motorway system with the M1, the M62, all well placed to offer fast and easy connections to many places south of Leeds and into the whole of the Wakefield district. We have plenty of space for an interchange with car parking, which could offer flexibility to business people, tourists and residents. After all, isn't HS2 about passenger transport? We don't want a runaway train that costs billions, but doesn't stop anywhere except what will become more of a transport bottleneck called Leeds. How is that going to improve overall journey times? Another thing that really defies common sense is the failure to invest substantial monies in the local railway system so that people can use the HS2. I'm a councillor representing Pontefract. Campaigners are weary of fighting a battle to get recognition for our case for an improved rail service. It just hasn't happened. Not in the past, not now, and it looks like not in the future either. Pontefract still has only one train an hour into Leeds. It's just not right that inequality in transport provision is allowed to continue, and the HS2 plan underlines that inequality and does not address it. Just to conclude, I'm very disappointed with the plans of HS2 as they stand at the moment, and would earnestly request that the government takes another look at their own proposals. There's still time to improve what could be a brilliant regeneration and passenger transport opportunity for the area, bringing improved prosperity for one and all. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Blizzard.
Councillor Blizzard, Normanton Ward 10. I'd just like to agree with both my colleagues, as this will have a really big impact on the surrounding area. And at Normanton, we have residents complaining every surgery we have that there's no trains, there's only one an hour, and the platforms aren't big enough to accept more carriages. So I do agree with my two colleagues there.
Thank you. Councillor Isherwood.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I listened to these debates with a certain amount of interest about, well, we've only got one train an hour to get us into Leeds. I would kill for one train an hour. In places which made these districts great, the engine rooms of this place, like Featherstone when we lost as mining industries and all that carry on that we had in the past. We can't even get a train into Leeds. Can you imagine the amount of regeneration that we could create in our villages and towns? Now you can get a train to Kirkgate, where, well, what use is that? All the proposed jobs that are going on, you need to be into Westgate so you can get into Leeds. Even a train into Westgate would help our regeneration, no end. Now the wards I represent, Featherstone, no chance. Street House, no chance. Charleston, you could probably catch a bus into Wakefield and then catch on to Leeds. That's if the bus came back, because there's no buses runs through Charleston after 7 o'clock. So when they start talking to you about 50 odd billion and rising for some train that'll take you it'll take us a day to get to Leeds to even catch it. To be honest with you, I have got a certain amount of reservations, and if we were having a vote today, I know which way I'd vote. But it seems to me Leeds may benefit, Sheffield may benefit, London will certainly benefit. They will definitely benefit. Meanwhile, we can't even get a connection to get there. And I support exactly what Councillor Loughman's saying, that we need some internal investment so we can get about our own district, let alone to London in whatever time it's going to take. Thank you.
Councillor Halliday.
Well, I certainly agree with Councillor Isherwood on all what he's said, and I'll come at it from an anorak point of view. We don't all wear anoraks, climate change. We talk about infrastructure, and you talk about emissions, you talk about cars blocking the centre of Wakefield and everything. And it was the last Conservative government, unfortunately, who, two before that, who did away with all the railways. Beeching, I think his name was, or something. I remember being brought up in Albethorpe, where people could get on a train and go all over the district. And like Councillor Isherwood says, I want to see Featherstone get a better position, and rail will cut out all the traffic on us roads and think of the goods what we can move round the areas in Wakefield. It will regenerate money, and for the amount of money spent on HS2, because we're talking 50 odd million, let's not kid ourselves, that's now. It keeps jumping up every time I turn round. Wife says, do you know how much we're spending now? I said, ooh. And so I visualise we're talking about 75 million before it comes to fruition. Billion, sorry. Or even 100. And I find that frightening. That is an immense amount of money, what could put an infrastructure all round Wakefield and district, right out from Emsworth, Featherstone, you name it, and we could all join up. So I find it appalling. I'm not sitting on the fence, I'm just totally against it.
Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Listening to the comments from colleagues around the chamber, I think that very, very clearly the jury's still sitting and thinking about this. If we look at HS2 itself, I suppose we're going through a process that our predecessors went through when they were looking at the motorway networks being dropped into the British Isles. Because I guess if you were looking at capacity, which is what they were looking at, capacity in terms of roadways, you couldn't literally just stick alongside an existing road. You probably had to do something quite separate. Very, very difficult situation. And HS2 then, well, the implications, there's a lot said about the benefits that come from HS2. And there's a lot been said about is the case proven in Wakefield. And I think that's got to be a question that gets reflected back to government in terms of the economic impact. Because whilst the economic impact, whilst it's generally acknowledged and it's actually generally welcomed by a number of the bigger cities that are affected by the route. I believe 8 out of 10 of the UK's biggest cities will get service from this, and surprise, surprise, they're mostly quite keen on the idea. When you actually look at situations like ours, the comment's already been made. Leeds will do well. It's quite possible that Sheffield will do well, and what are the real benefits for us here? I think the other thing that to reflect upon is that when we've looked at some of these big schemes that have taken place, the really, really big schemes, that then one of the difficulties has been the impact on the people that live at ground zero and how long that is an impact for. Now, as I understand it, the proposal is to start in London and work north. I know that generally, in terms of local authorities up in the north of England, I know that there's been a lot of lobbying to say, you shouldn't do that. Because actually, if you want to give economic benefit, you actually ought to see something happening up here and working down, so that we actually really start to see the benefits sooner. So there are a lot of arguments. One huge concern is that with the fixed route, the impact on the people that live adjacent to that route is going to be a significant one for a period of time. And partly it's about the blight that says, oh, train's going through near you, isn't it? And the impact that will have. Now, we need to be sure that there's proper means to rectify and to resolve that, so that the people actually can get some benefit from that. The people that live there can get some benefit from that. There's another issue, because actually this was, this is a Conservative government policy programme, which actually was a continuation of the previous government's programme, albeit the previous government's programme was about the West Coast line and was actually about taking high-speed rail up to Glasgow. The Y shape has only come in recently, so Yorkshire is only in here relatively recently. And I suppose there's an argument that says if a sufficient case to stop it takes place, then actually the whole of Yorkshire could be disadvantaged. That's something else that we need to think about. And it's interesting because the people that are discussing this, we know people that are really affected by it in the most basic ways. And a lot of the people that perhaps are endorsing it aren't as affected by it. So, if I'm sending a sort of a sceptical, it's not sceptical, it's a case of there are questions to answer, there's work that needs to be done, and we need to know that our people across this district, that's everybody across the district that's touched by this, can actually get some sort of sense of benefit from it, and isn't going to get that major negative impact that some of us are concerned about. So, that's my reflection on that. I know there are other people that may have comments.
Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, I think it's starting to become sort of simpler for me. I think the economics have definitely not convinced me. I hear what you say and I hear what other people say. And I said in this chamber a while ago that there are some sort of other countries that have looked at this and indeed done it, and we talked about Spain. The one thing I am certain when you look at what's happened in Spain is London will gain dramatically by this. I am 100% certain about that. I'm also certain, and I think Graham's talked about it, I'm also certain that the likes of Sheffield, Manchester and even Leeds will gain by it. But there has been reports recently that have come out that have said there's a number of bigger cities, or big cities, not as big as those, that will start to lose. They've talked about Bristol, they've talked about other areas, losing hundreds of millions of pounds as well. So the economics for me definitely concern me around this. What I am concerned even more though, and I'm 100% around these recommendations, is you have to be sat around the table to put these sorts of points of view. If you walk away from the table, then you've no chance. And I take on board Maureen's points. The route is very important to all citizens within Wakefield, certainly across the country. If you're not round the table discussing some of these issues, you won't be involved in the route, you won't be involved in some of the economic decisions that need to be made. So the recommendations, to me, I'm 100% supporting them. I would like, before I came to a final decision on it all, I'd like to understand what was happening. I think so would not only this government, so will some future governments. So I'm for the recommendations 100%, and I think we should keep talking about it. But I also think I'm very sceptical about whether it will ever succeed.
Dagger.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. The proposed £50.1 billion development of HS2 is being promoted on strategic, economic and environmental grounds. However, I am not convinced it would bring such benefits to Wakefield. In my particular ward, Normanton, the line passes through open countryside, skirts the village of Kirkthorpe, through the Welbeck landfill site and close to listed buildings on the Newland estate. This will have significant environmental impact on the open countryside, the village of Kirkthorpe and the Newland estate. And it's important that the council investigate the potential impact on the local community. Furthermore, I don't believe HS2 will solve the North's economic problems. It might even make them worse. Indeed, infrastructure experts are not convinced that rapid rail systems spread the wealth around. On the contrary, some evidence suggests that since the lines run both ways, high-speed services suck more capital to the prosperous south. Moreover, far from benefiting small cities like Wakefield, it could make them even more isolated and deprived. There are huge economic divides between the north and the south, and a shiny new train line won't necessarily solve them. It might just make them worse. The council should not be railroaded into just accepting the case for HS2.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. In terms of the route, I think we've got to obviously remember, as I'm sure most people will, that it's not just Wakefield that is concerned about the route, but all through the home counties and right up from, if you can say, London to Wakefield and Leeds, there are concerns about the route. And yes, if that could be looked at to make it easier for any local area concerns, I'm sure that that would be done in different parts of the country. The unfortunate thing, as I understand it, is that when you start altering the route to try and introduce tunnelling, etc., you start to push the cost to an unacceptable level. And staying parochially as far as Wakefield is concerned, having read some of the documentation, my understanding is that any other route that would be less harmful to the Wakefield district into Leeds city centre would in fact be more harmful to more areas, and therefore this is why this particular route was considered to be the most appropriate. And we have to remember it hasn't yet been fully accepted, although I do accept that it's not likely to be changed that much. I have to say, Madam Mayor, that I came last time and said I wasn't an apologist for HS2, but having read up a bit more about it, I must say I am beginning to warm towards it, because I think that there are more positives for the future of the north of England as well as other parts of the country if this is introduced. And the government have said that they want full cross-party support for this, otherwise they're likely to abandon at least part of it. And we know that some of the senior Labour politicians are lessening their enthusiasm for it. So it is at risk, and as Councillor Walsh has said, if the government was to abandon the Leeds line of HS2, then Yorkshire as a whole would suffer, and I'm sure Wakefield would suffer equally, if not more, than other parts of Yorkshire. It's also said that there is a greater risk to the economy by cancelling it. The government has said that the cost of providing HS2, whatever that is, 50 billion if you include the cost of the train sets, that spending will not affect other transport spending, be it on roads or railways. One of our old friends, Lord Heseltine, was on the radio yesterday, and he compared the cost of Crossrail in London, saying that it was almost like continuing that cost to build HS2, and therefore it's not going to be something that will dramatically affect the other transport in Wakefield, certainly. And if you look at page 71 of the report, Madam Mayor, the second paragraph from the bottom says the analysis suggests that significant economic benefits could be generated by refining timetables on the existing rail network following the introduction of HS2. So when we get all these pleas about what's going to happen to a journey from Castleford to Leeds or Pontefract to Leeds, you know, it says it here. Other rail networks will be able to be improved, timetables will be able to be improved, and in many respects, I don't think that the saving in time is going to be the most important benefit that HS2 will bring. Yes, it will bring benefits because of saving time, but the overall economic benefit to the north, as I see it, will be just as important as any benefit will be to London and the south of England. So, as I said, Madam Mayor, I'm warming to it. I still think there are problems that need to be addressed, and I think Councillor Box would be quite right to put the interest of Wakefield to wherever it's going to be put, to whatever report. But let's not be so parochial that we think Wakefield is either more important than Yorkshire or more important than the north of England.
Councillor Wassell, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It is Councillor Wassell from Normanton, Ward 10. The HS2 proposed route does run through our ward, as has been mentioned by earlier members. I would just like to flag up the lack of connectivity with the 4 international airports that we have in Yorkshire. It's easier to get to London as we speak now than it is to get to Leeds Bradford Airport, Manchester Airport, Robin Hood Airport or Humberside Airport. So I would like to see some of this proposed 50 billion being spent on local infrastructure so that we can better connect internationally and not just with the capital. Further consultation is taking place today. I understand that there's a presentation in Crofton, which myself and members from Ward 10 will be attending, and we will listen to what HS2 has to say yet again and see if there's been any amendments to the proposed route or to see if the economic case or the business case is actually better presented today than it has been in the past. That's what we'll be doing after this meeting.
Well, I think this has been well debated. I'm just going to let the Deputy Mayor have one minute, and then I'm going to move it to Peter Fox to wind up.
I promise I'll only be 1 minute as well. One of the things that distresses me terribly about this whole debate is the British malaise. We invented railways, and now we've invented the linear route. The linear one. They don't need an inch of new land to put it. They put it over existing motorways. And one's just been opened, the linear line from Shanghai to Beijing, taking people at 200 miles an hour got to stop at streets. Why do they want to take all new land? They only need to put a structure of it, my existing roofs, that the land's been taken, and put a Lilia motor in there, which is a British invention, and we have to wait while Germans is constructed in China, paid for by Chinese. Why don't we look at that? And it wouldn't upset anybody.
Thank you, Laurie. Councillor Peter Box.
I think Laurie's just shown us that we're all experts on railway all of a sudden now. I think everybody who spoke, we're suddenly all experts. I mean, first of all, Madam Mayor, can I thank colleagues for their contribution this afternoon. To pick up Councillor Walsh's point, I did actually ask the then Secretary of State for Transport about the idea of starting in the north of England, because actually I think that makes sense if we are to have real investment in the north. But that obviously isn't going to be the case now. That has been raised. I think it's important that we do reaffirm we want to see investment in the north of England. I think it's a comment that has been mentioned by other people, but we need to reiterate on the record we welcome investment in the north. The fact that we have questions to raise, quite rightly as a council on behalf of our residents, doesn't mean we don't welcome that level of investment. Indeed, we want more investment than HS2 might give us. I have mischievously suggested that in order to save some cost and to directly benefit Wakefield, HS2 could, of course, stop in Wakefield rather than go to Leeds. It was mischievous because the leader of Leeds Council was in the room at the same time. Sometimes we do have to invest in the future, and actually this authority has said that on occasions in the past. If you look at the Hepworth Gallery, we invested in that as an authority, and for 10 years there was some criticism. People didn't accept the figures that we put forward, as David said. It was mentioned on University Challenge only the other day. I think the difference with the Hepworth Gallery is that we were quite sure about the cost benefit to the district, and we were proved right. Clearly HS2 is on a different scale entirely in terms of the 50 billion. And I think there are still questions around that need to be answered. Is it about speed, or is it about capacity? If it's about capacity, will people that we represent be able to afford to buy a ticket to go on the new railway line to get to London at an increased speed? Will this district and its residents benefit directly, or is it going to be a trickle-down benefit over some years? And the truth is that we don't know. So in the end, when all the debate is over and when Parliament votes early next year, and that's the real crucial time, I think, early next year, when Parliament is to vote again, what is the situation at that time in terms of trying to work out what the future will be? So whichever way that decision goes, we have got to look at the future. And if HS2 doesn't go ahead, we need a compelling narrative as to what we would want in its place. One of the real problems is that we do not have a national transport strategy that we are all aware of. I was speaking to some business people in Wakefield recently, 200 or 300, and I asked them, do any of you know what the national transport strategy is? And nobody knew. Not one single person was aware of what our national transport strategy is. And Councillor Alan Russell has raised an excellent point. If we are going to have, eventually, HS2, if we were to have that, then it would seem to me sensible that at the same time you look at air. What is the best place for an airport in serving West Yorkshire? Is the present site fit for purpose? I know many people who would say it is not. So the point I'm making is we have got to get away from looking at HS2 in isolation. Because if we do that, then actually we aren't serving the long-term interests of the residents of this district or indeed West Yorkshire. So we have to look at the whole. So what I would propose, Madam Mayor, having listened to colleagues and saying to reiterate my thanks to everybody who's contributed, is to ask Council to agree that we seek an early meeting with ministers to do 5 things. First of all, establish how this district will benefit economically from the HS2 proposals. 2, discuss what other investment will be forthcoming to address inter-district connectivity. 3, discuss what plans there are for east-west connectivity to be accelerated. 4thly, ensure there is no worsening of our existing rail service to London. And finally, to raise the concerns of our residents who oppose the proposed route and take whatever other decisions are reached, those concerns are addressed by government. Now, I think that encapsulates, hopefully, all the key issues that be raised by members right across the chamber and of all parties. It does, as colleagues have said, make sure we can stay at the table. And I would also suggest that when we've heard from ministers on our request, that we discuss this matter again. I think we do have some time, bearing in mind the final decision of Parliament won't be until early next year, to reconvene, discuss it again. Let's see what the answers are. At the moment, the truth is this: we are not in a position to come down either side of the argument because of the fact that we do not have the information that we need to make a considered judgment on behalf of the people who matter most, and that is the residents of this district and the future residents of the district. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Councillor Box. I think we ought to now move to vote in favour or against this report. So first of all, take all in favour.
Madam Mayor, I'm sorry to interrupt on your first meeting as Mayor, and I know you told us all to watch our P's and Q's. Well, and I've tried to be very good so far today.
You're doing all right.
Thank you. Thank you, that's touching. Can I suggest that we actually vote on the proposals I've put forward, and I can make sure that tomorrow, very latest, they are typed up and circulated to every member.
All in favour? Yeah. We're voting in favour? Yes, thank you. Thanks very much. Anyone against, please? That is carried. Agenda item 12 has been referred to Council by the Controlling Group as one of its 4 annual business items. The matter before Council is to have an open debate on private rented housing. Council procedure rules allow for a maximum of 45 minutes to be set aside for this debate.
Madam Mayor, 45 minutes isn't compulsory, is it?
Yes.
No. Just checking.
I will firstly ask Councillor Mrs Jeffrey to introduce the item and then open the matter up for the general debate. And may I remind members that no speeches may exceed 5 minutes. Once we have reached the 45 minutes, I have closed the debate. Oh, it says Jeffrey on mine, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll put my blonde wig on. Not to say that's a wig. Get myself into trouble there. Get on with the business, that's the thing. Madam Mayor, once again, on the 15th of October, the Cabinet actually approved a report where we found that we, as a council, were having to step in to protect vulnerable people, due once again to the unfeeling policies of the coalition government and the Conservatives. In addition to the bedroom tax that affects 5,000 tenants in the district and is having a negative impact on residents and businesses alike, social landlords, that's been fully supported by the Conservatives in this chamber on many occasions, we've now got housing benefit legislation that's seen the benefits of private rented tenants aged between 25 and 35 reduced to the same level of local housing allowance as those aged under 25. In Wakefield, the local housing allowance amounts to £55 a week, which is very obviously not enough for tenants to afford a rent a flat of their own. Previously, they were receiving £88.85 a week, a sum this unfeeling government thought was too much, and they're now getting a reduction of £146.68 per calendar month. But prior to this vindictive legislation, we had 938 claimants for the shared accommodation rate, so-called shared accommodation rate, because that's all you can afford on that rate. You can't afford a place of your own. And since this benefit change, we now have 1,383 claimants, an increase of 445 people, or over 47%. This has obviously created more demand for rooms in houses for multiple occupation, something that the coalition government or even our Conservative councillors have made quite clear at previous meetings that they care nothing about. They would do nothing to help. Indeed, it's them, the coalition and Labour and the Conservative councillors that have placed the tenants aged 25 to 35 in the situation they now find themselves in. But this Labour Council, despite all the cuts that we're having to make, we've committed resources to try to improve the situation for some of the most affected tenants. And we feel it would be inhumane to do otherwise. We've actually established a housing in multiple occupation loans fund of £125,000 to be administered by the White Rose Credit Union, to be used to create around 100 safe, affordable rooms to support low-income tenants across the district who now, through no fault of their own, find themselves in a very difficult, unaffordable housing situation. And I'd say to the Conservatives that they can actually feel very proud of themselves, because their vindictive savings have resulted in more costs to be expended by a council already subject to the most damaging cuts in the history of local government. But the Conservatives won't be, the public won't be, because what we intend to do is to let them know every time something's implemented, we're going to let the public know that every opportunity and the heartache and financial worries that they're constantly implementing and creating for vulnerable people within the district, we'll do as much as we can to mitigate some of those proposals that are coming from government.
Thank you, Councillor Stokes. Anyone wishing to get involved in this debate, please indicate clearly, please.
Can I just say that I think that the silence from this side of the council chamber is because we're not surprised, we're just incredibly disappointed by the sheer housing scandal that's occurring in our district and in the country. But the opposition there, I'm amazed that you at least don't want to comment, don't want to defend what's actually happening in terms of the constituents that you represent and we represent, who are experiencing absolutely unbelievable at times in terms of how to pay the rent, how to retain their housing, and how to manage, particularly when you're young and vulnerable. And yet you don't defend that, you simply accept it, and I'm a bit taken aback by this callousness.
Thank you, Councillor Rowley. Councillor Morley.
How could you forget me, Madam Mayor? One of the most frustrating things I have come across in the last 18 months serving on this council, Madam Mayor, is housing. The times that my surgeries have been full of residents coming and speaking about the housing shortage, the housing waiting list, the RWDH, the lack of housing, and the fact when they're in private rented housing, the landlord is wanting now to sell the house and ask them to move out, and they cannot even afford the deposit and the bond for the new house. It's one of the most frustrating things. I'm sure Councillor Lyles' surgery in Outwood is for them as well. It's absolutely disgraceful, the bedroom tax that this government is putting on to the people to make it even worse for them. I just can't believe the Conservatives on this council sit there and cannot say anything about it. It's horrendous. It's a draconian piece of legislation should never be put in place, Madam Mayor, and it just saddens me so much that there's nothing more we can do to help these residents. It just sickens me to the backbones.
Any more? Yes. Councillor Isherwood.
Mine's just a quick comment. I won't mind having a little bet on it either. The same people who can't afford the rents, the same young people that are having to be helped to see if they can get into a single room. I bet they're the very same people that are queuing up in the food banks to get, the, I was going to say handouts, but I'll not say handouts, to get a way of eating a warm meal. And I think you lot should be ashamed of yourself, and you should be supporting whatever they're doing here to help these people. They're all vulnerable. They're all young and vulnerable people. We should be proud of what we're doing, but you should be disgusted with yourself.
Councillor Halliday.
Yeah, I'd just like to put it to the council that somebody reads Rule 43C of the Human Rights Act, and if you read that regarding housing, you'll know what I mean. And I suggest that everybody in this chamber looks that up, because that gives a person the right to have the freedom of his home, however big or however small.
Councillor Kirkpatrick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's reported in the press this week that a housing association in South Shields is actively considering demolishing a street of 3-bedroom houses because they can't let them, because people are scared to take on the rent. And if anything sums up the absurdity of housing policy, then surely that has to be it.
Any more speakers? Councillor Wassell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to acknowledge an earlier statement where it said that we were going to go into a joint venture with WDH. I'd just like to flag that back up again because it is relevant to this issue, and hopefully we can create some better homes in the vicinity for our residents.
Thank you. Yes. Yes, Councillor.
Councillor Morley, the only lady that's come to me is a councillor from your ward about wanting a property, housing, because she's got no response from any of you in the ward, in Stanley Ward.
Councillor Morley.
Can Councillor Lyles please give me the name of the resident?
Can you continue this discussion outside the meeting, please? Anyone else wants to speak before I ask Councillor Stokes to wind up? Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's just a comment. I mean, I think that there's been a lot of work done. Councillor Stokes talks about a fund that's been set up to help people go into safe housing in terms of multiple occupancy. Government's made a number of pieces of funding available to support councils that are faced with difficulties. And it's interesting that this council actually uses elements of that money. Obviously, this is the controlling group business, and this is what they wanted to bring forward. I must admit, I would have thought there might have been some more issues around some of the difficulties that tenants have in the relationships that they have with their landlords, or perhaps something about how things go in terms of, I think a comment has been made about a bond, but how that's secured so that people don't unreasonably lose their bonds. So there are some really pressing issues. I'm a little bit curious because I suppose really this isn't going to sound very nice. I don't mean it to sound as it sounds, but it's surprising how many experts we actually have on the private rented sector because they're actually operating within that sector in the council chamber, but they're not here at the moment. And people probably have got a point of view and probably have got something that they could share that might be useful, but they've been excluded from the council chamber. I'm a bit surprised. I suppose I'm actually speaking up for colleagues who are actually in the controlling group that have had to leave. I know that there's a difficulty and there's a legal difficulty, but it seems a little unfair that the people that probably, that number of people who actually operate as landlords, who actually excuse themselves, it seems a bit unfair they've not the opportunity to make a comment. That's all I would say, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Halliday.
I think Councillor Walsh, I'm saying Councillor Walsh, I'm being nice today on best behaviour, but certainly Councillor Walsh, you've skated round everything and twisted it as usual. One of the main elements of what Graham put forward was the bedroom tax, and for some reason your government seems to think that people in rented accommodation, whether it be Almos, housing associations, private landlords or whatever, have no right to have X amount of bedrooms. They have no right to have the grandchildren come stay with them. They have no right to have anybody who's ill, equipment in a spare room. Now, if you think that humanly nice, then I'm very disappointed in you. Very, very disappointed. And I don't know, and Councillor Morley made an excellent point, actually, because a lot of you are representing areas where there is this sort of thing going on. And I just don't know what you say to your constituents, because they certainly come to this side of the chamber in the drove saying what despicable rules you've brought out.
Anyone else before I ask Councillor Stokes to wind up? No. Over to you, Councillor Stokes, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think once again the quietness of the opposition on issues relating to vulnerable people within this district speaks volumes, really. I know Councillor Walsh has referred to resources that the government have given to help out. When you look at things like the discretionary housing payment, which is a temporary payment for 6 months, at some stage in the future, these poor vulnerable people are going to have that money taken away from them. They're going to have to manage on what the government tells them that they've got to manage on. So the money that we're actually getting is temporary. We do get things that haven't been mentioned today, like we do actually operate a bond deposit scheme. We do have things like the mortgage rescue scheme. But all these have been introduced by this Labour Council, because it seems to me that the Conservatives in this council chamber, over many, many meetings, not just this one, have actually made it abundantly clear that they've got no interest whatsoever in helping people who are in vulnerable circumstances, particularly with their rents and benefits, because they seem to think that they're from somewhere else. They're not the people that they represent. And I think that we all should be looking to help those that are most vulnerable in our society. And we will continue to do whatever we can as a Labour Council to do that. And it does actually show the difference that a Labour Council is over a potential Conservative council.
Thank you, Councillor Stokes. And that now concludes what has been quite an interesting debate. Right, agenda item 13 is to deal with any questions made by members, due notice having been given pursuant to paragraph 15.5 of the Council Procedure Rules within the Constitution. No questions have been received. The final agenda item, number 14, is to deal with any motions proposed by members, written notice having been given pursuant to paragraph 16 of the Council's Procedure Rules and set out in the Constitution. In accordance with Council's procedure rules, Councillor Box gave the required notice to submit the motion which is set out on page 2 of the Council summons. Councillor Box, would you please move your motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Hemingway is going to second this, and I want Councillor Hemingway to speak rather than myself, but I want to just ask now, if I can, that when the amendment is moved, I will seek to ask for a recorded vote. I think it's really important that our residents know who supports hard-working families who are being hard-pressed and who supports bankers. It's really important that we get that information out to the people of Wakefield. So I do want to actually sum up right at the end, I think, as is my right to reply to the debate. But Councillor Hemingway will second. Speak.
Yes, can I have four people to second?
I think we can scrape that together, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Right, thank you, Councillor Box. Is the motion seconded?
Second the motion, Madam Mayor. In seconding the motion, I'd like to speak now.
Thank you.
The EU wants to impose a cap on bankers' bonuses to try and stop the reckless culture of excess and greed that laid low the economies of the world. The cap is not draconian. It limits bankers to bonuses worth 100% of their salaries, even 200% with shareholder agreement. That's still hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds. Yet there is one government in Europe fighting even this paltry cap. Incredibly, our own Tory government doesn't seem to believe that bankers' bonuses should be restricted, and they're spending thousands of pounds of public money to try to stop the cap. Yet again, this sorry episode illustrates the Tory government's wanton squandering of taxpayers' money in fighting legal challenges. Only recently, Jeremy Hunt fought against the closure of Lewisham A&E after he ruled that it could close. Ian Duncan-Smith fought against a ruling criticising his workfare policy, and now George Osborne is fighting hard so his friends in the city can still be paid obscene amounts of money. But why should we be surprised by the overt self-interestedness of this government? After all, one of the first things this government did on coming into power was to cut the 50p top rate of tax for the super rich. Who were the main beneficiaries of this tax cut? Yet again, the bankers who caused the crash, in whose name the government pursues its austerity policy. The same bankers who the Tories receive half of their party funding from. This is a government of the rich, standing up for the rich. They have the wrong priorities. Almost every measure they implement is designed purely to serve a small elite. All the while, they heap more and more cuts upon local government and the already stretched services that ordinary people rely on. Unfairly targeting the more northern deprived authorities and the regional authorities like Northern Scotland, who in some cases, even giving increases in money to the Tory authorities of the south. We are seeing the return of real and absolute poverty in parts of this country. And what are the government doing about it? Absolutely nothing. While mothers have to use food banks to feed their children, who are the government busy standing up for? The bankers. While the government penalises young people without a job and hammers the unemployed with sanctions for slight misdemeanours, they use taxpayers' money to stand up for bankers. While they say that the disabled and people with almost nothing have to put up with the iniquitous bedroom tax to save taxpayers' money, they spend the same money liberally to protect the pay of their friends in the City of London. Quite simply, they don't understand or care about the impact of their policies on the lives of millions of ordinary working people who are having to cope with a cost of living crisis. Ordinary people whose bills are going up, whose real wages are falling month on month, some of whom are having to choose whether to eat or to heat their homes. I urge Council to support this motion and call on the Tory government to stop standing up for bankers and start standing up for the millions of people whose lives are ruined by their policies.
Thank you, Councillor Hemingway. In accordance with Council Procedure Rule 13.6, an amendment to the motion has been submitted. The amendment has been circulated to members prior to the meeting. Councillor Walsh, would you please introduce your amendment?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I'd like to take this opportunity to speak to the amendment. Obviously, in this case, it's a response. It's an alternative to the amendment that Councillor Hemingway has just spoken of, because it's another example of you've got a clear view and you've got a clear sense of injustice. That's the message you're trying to get out to the world. But actually, there's additional elements that you don't feel it's comfortable to look at. So the alternative is about acknowledging the progress that's been made by the British government. British government at the forefront of global efforts to tackle unacceptable pay practices in banks. The efforts themselves have had a major impact on making banking more responsible. It's interesting, you talk about this government aiding its friends, the bankers. But if you actually look at the light touch regulation that the previous government operated, and you look back at 2007, 2008, when they were quite comfortably allowing bonuses of £11.5 billion to be collected by the bankers, that is absolutely stupid. It is balmy. And you think that we think it's a great idea. What actually has been happening is a force of regulation that's brought down banking bonuses to something like £1.6 billion. Actually, that's still a stupidly high figure from my perspective. Because here we are sat in a council chamber where we have to support the needs of a district with about £500 million. So the bankers in their bonuses in Galway, they've got enough to run 3 Wakefields. Government is working to regulate and make sure that if there are banking bonuses in place, those bonuses are not as likely to draw people into the excessive risks that were all too common as we look back at the previous government's approach to the banks. Now I say we're working with about £500 million. You've talked about the government cutting back. You've talked about reductions that have been made. You've talked about the difficulties that brings. And in 2007-2008, this council spent nearly just over £500 million, £550 million. It's spending now, because you talked about the council difficulty, you talked about the money that's being cut back. It is spending now an amount potentially in this financial year that will be more than that, £562 million expenditure. If you actually start to do some sums, if you look at it, it's very, very difficult times. If you look at it, this council has gone through some very, very difficult times. If you look at it, people are experiencing some very difficult times. You talk about hard-working families. Well, in addition to trying to regulate the banking sector, and regulate it in a way that is more likely to allow people to be a little bit more prudent rather than going for the riskier bonuses, we've also been doing things for the hard-working people, as you call it, of the district, because the last 4 years have been hugely challenging. But we are actually seeing real progress. Now, there's a job of work that has to be done, but we're seeing progress. Inflation is down and interest is at record lows. Now that protects those people that depend upon money, their interest and credit payments. The deficit's down a third. Balancing benefits and reducing the tax burden on hard-working people becomes something of a priority. We've seen the biggest ever cash rise in the basic state pension. And by April 2014, we'll have seen an average tax cut of £705 for 25 million people. The 2.7 million people with the lowest incomes are going to be taken out of tax completely. Supported businesses have created 1.4 million new jobs. 500,000 in the last year alone have gone into apprenticeships. We've got 300,000 more small businesses.
15 seconds, Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move my amendment.
Quickly move it then.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move my amendment as laid down. Thank you.
Is this amendment seconded?
I second the amendment, Madam Mayor, and reserve my right to speak later in the debate.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kirkpatrick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've looked at the amendment as tabled, and I've listened to what Councillor Walsh has just had to say. So I shall respond briefly. Paragraph A of his amendment says, acknowledges the progress made by the government in tackling unacceptable pay practices, and paragraph C commends the government's tough and rapid action. Now, I can remember as far back as the days before the last general election, and the party leaders televised debates, and Cameron made an awful lot of promises. I can't think of any that he's kept, but one of them was to curb bankers' bonuses. So, 3.5 years into his government, how's his tough and rapid action going? Well, so far, it seems to amount to me, as Councillor Hemingway said earlier, that he's managed to cut the top rate of tax for them, and not only that, he's allowed payment to be deferred into this current financial year so they can get the tax relief on it. That showed them, didn't it, Councillor Walsh? I'm sure, Councillor Hemingway also referred to the fact that the Tories get more than 50% of their election funds from the financial services sector, but I'm sure that the two couldn't possibly be related, could they? Thank you. Now to what Councillor Walsh said. He's talked about the light touch of the last Labour government on the bankers. We over on this side complained about that as well. We do occasionally criticise our own governments. You can maybe learn a trick or two from us. But at the time that the Labour government was adopting a light touch approach, it should be remembered that the Tory opposition were shouting for less regulation, not more. Finally, Councillor Walsh, you talk about bankers' bonuses still being ridiculously high. So why aren't you supporting the resolution?
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, you've taken this debate to see what the difference between the Conservatives and the Labour Party are. For the last 18 months on this council, the Labour group on this council put resolutions about rent employed with Councillor Travis, about other issues, bedroom taxes. Who do you choose to defend? The bankers. The people that got the country into the mess in the first place in 2008. The Labour Party had to bail out. And once again, you're there to defend them. It just goes to show who you want to stick up for. The needy in the country or the best off. Just, it beggars belief that that's the people you can represent. Unbelievable.
Councillor Tully.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I rise to support the resolution. And if we want to start talking about figures, facts, well, we'll attempt to proceed. The resolution quite clearly states that while this government is spending public money to defend bankers, people and hard-working people and families in this country are going without. That is a fact. And for Councillor Walsh to start talking about light touch, bankers' bonuses are abhorrent. Whoever instigates them or whoever puts them into place. So let's not start playing these, we did this, you did this. I was opposed to bankers' bonuses in the last government as I'm opposed to bankers' bonuses and the implementation of them as they stand today. But let's start talking about some figures, if we're going to be correct. A government that's prepared to subsidise house buying to the tune of £600,000 while we're taking money away from hard-pressed people with bedroom tax. We all keep being told in this chamber and elsewhere it's all about deficit reduction. This country has been said, it's been said earlier by people in this chamber, is one of the third richest economies in the world. And this country spends an inordinate amount of money on welfare. But what people don't seem to realise is the amount of money that we spend on welfare is somewhere in the tune of about £150 billion a year. £70 billion of that goes on our pensioners. And when we start looking at breaking down the welfare bill, we spend a tiny amount of 3.6% on job seekers allowance and unemployed people. So let's cut to the chase about this issue, about this country's ills and all the difficulties of this country are all the problems of the unemployed and the disadvantaged and disabled people of this country. Because that's not quite the case. But yeah, let's talk about their friend over there, Mr. Paperclips. What do we call him? Nadine Zawi, Conservative Member of Parliament for Stratford-upon-Avon, who spends, what does he say in his article? On investigation, I've discovered that the electricity supply for my mobile home located in the stable and yard for themselves was linked to my house to the tune of £5,000. Unemployed people in this country under the age of 25 receive a measly £2,900 a year to survive. And unemployed people in this country over the age of 25 get a measly £3,000 PA per annum to survive on. And this person makes an apology because he says, I inadvertently didn't know it was coupled up to my stables when I was keeping 20 horses warm and I needed a further electricity supply for the right time when they've been chasing around countryside trying to kill foxes. Them's the sort of people your people are doing deals with, and they don't stand up for the hard-working people of this community. And it's high time you start to come clean and start to tell people what you're all supposedly be about. Because I find it absolutely disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. You can sit there and defend a system of bankers' bonuses, and then we have to have an apology from a guy who's one of the richest, and it's not about envy, but I had a constituent come to see me the other day who failed to attend the Job Centre Plus because his young child was unwell. He has now been penalised to the tune of £10 a week for the next 6 weeks out of his £71.70 a week. He didn't get the opportunity to apologise, like their friend did from Stratford-upon-Avon to the tune of £5,000. So what I say to you is this: it's time we started, and we will at this side of the chamber continue to defend hard-working people, deprived people, and the people who are disadvantaged. You people want to continue to support and spend public money on bankers' bonuses, well, that's for you to decide. But as far as I'm concerned, my politics have always remained the same. I'm here to make sure that people who are downtrodden, who are unable to speak for themselves, have their voice heard in this chamber, and I've no doubt this side of the House will continue to do that, and I support the resolution.
Councillor Travis. I'll just take this one then. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to pick up on Councillor Walsh's progress. Well, it don't feel like progress from the people I represent in the workplace, the people I see out in the community. The growing increase of food banks we've already talked about, the people queuing up at them food banks. Do they see progress? The closure of every employed factory, not just in this area, throughout the UK. For those people now who are facing a lifetime of benefits, do they see progress? To all the young people who your government have stopped here later, who can't take post-16 education, are they seeing progress? To the many people, young people in the workplace now who are given zero-hour contracts, or waiting for a text or a telephone call to say whether they can work tomorrow, is that progress? To the outsourcing and privatisation and the breakup of the NHS, is that progress? All these examples, Councillor Walsh, they're actually getting worse. So where is the progress? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You go to seconder, Councillor Dagger, to move to the vote. Yes, thank you.
I think, can I the amendment first and then I want...
Yes, yes. So we're going to now vote on the amendment. Well, it's been voted on that we go to the vote.
Madam Mayor, I reserve the right to speak as the seconder of the motion.
Yes, I know that, but it's been proposed to go to the vote, so you've lost your opportunity. I'm sorry. Right, we're going to the vote on the amendment. Pardon? Yes, on the amendment first. This is the amendment.
No, we vote no on the vote.
Oh yes, sorry, yeah, you do. Yes, we are going to move to support the vote.
Right, show of hands.
Show of hands.
That's right.
Yes.
Now that's when there's lost your rule. Now then, we're on to amendment.
Sorry, Dave. Right, we're going to vote on the amendment now. All those in favour of the amendment?
Madam Mayor, it's a recorded vote for that.
Recorded vote then, yes, right.
This is the recorded vote on the amendment as proposed by Councillor Walsh. Okay.
You lost the right.
Because if there's a...
That the seconder can speak and can reserve the right to speak until the end of the debate.
If the question is put, you lose that right.
Can I try and help, Madam Mayor? There is what's happening. It's quite clear that Councillor Hopkins actually wanted to listen to the debate and then second it. That's what was going on in this council chamber. You're quite right. The procedural motion actually supersedes any right that has been reserved.
That's right. That's right.
Councillor Mrs Askew. Councillor Mrs Blizzard. Councillor Box. Councillor Mrs Broom. Councillor Bunny. Councillor Burton. Councillor Mrs Cliff. Councillor Miss Collins. Councillor Mrs Cummings. Councillor Dagger. Councillor Dean. Councillor Mrs Drysdale. Councillor Ellis. Councillor Forster. Councillor Mrs Garbett. Councillor Mrs Graham. Councillor Halliday. Councillor Harrison.
Against.
Councillor Hemingway. Councillor Mrs Heptonstall. Councillor Hopkins. Councillor Clive Hudson. Councillor Mrs Hudson. Councillor Graham Isherwood. Councillor Mrs Isherwood. Councillor Mrs Jeffrey. Councillor Johnson. Councillor Key. Councillor Kirkpatrick. Councillor Mrs Lyles. Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Miss Lockram. Councillor Mrs Lund. Councillor Manafield. Councillor Mrs Mitchell. No. Okay. Councillor Morley. Councillor Miss Pickin. Councillor Mrs Rhodes. Councillor Richardson. Councillor Mrs Rowley. Councillor Ian Sanders. Councillor Bill Sanders. Councillor Shaw. Councillor Miss Sheriff. Councillor Stokes. Councillor Stone. Councillor Dick Taylor. Councillor Tennant. Councillor Travis. Councillor Tully. Councillor Wallace. Councillor Walsh. Councillor Ward. Councillor Wassell. Councillor Miss Williams.
45 against and 9 for. That means that the amendment has failed. Councillor Box, as mover of the motion, you have the right to reply. In exercising your right of reply, may I remind you that no new matters can be introduced.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Remember that. I think it was on Monday, Sir Philip Hampton, the chairman of the Royal Bank of Scotland, was speaking at a conference in London. And he spoke about having an out-of-body experience. It's true. That was his exact words in dealing with bankers' pay. And he said he'd been besieged by those on £4 million pay packages complaining that things were, and I quote, very, very unfair. Because another bank was paying £6 million. And his words were, bankers take the biscuit. Madam Mayor, bankers aren't the only ones who take the biscuit. The opposition opposite, they take the biscuit as well. Yeah. At every opportunity over the last 2 or 3 years, they have supported their government, whatever it's done, hook, line and sinker. That's what they've done. If you speak to people on the street, from all parties, and those with no party affiliation, the thing they'll tell you above everything else that outrages them most is the level of bankers' pay and the level of their bonuses. I suspect that Councillor Walsh has not written the amendment himself. That's what I believe. I don't believe he's written it himself. But worse than that, it wouldn't be quite so bad if he had. What I believe he's done is to contact his head office and say, this is the resolution we've got. Give me some facts, give me some figures. And that's why it talks about EU regulations, of which I suspect Councillor Walsh has little personal knowledge. I also suspect Councillor Walsh does not know the figure that the EU is proposing to cap. I suspect that's the case. I'd challenge any of the members opposite to say, do you know the figure that is being proposed? Take it, silence means nobody knows. What the EU is proposing, that bankers' bonuses are capped at 200% of salary. That's the proposal. Now, most of us would think, actually, that is outrageously high. The party opposite, Madam Mayor, think that is acceptable and should be supported. That's what they think. Now, when Councillor Walsh and his colleagues went to their head office, they were also told, by the way, when you respond to the Labour Party resolution, don't forget to mention about the recovery. That's why we had the figures shown to us about inflation, unemployment, etc. And you can look at some of the statistics, Madam Mayor, and you can actually say that, just let me show that's on, that some of them have improved. But there's a certain reality that everyday life for people in this district, and that is, it's a two-tier recovery, at best, at best. Who's doing well? Bankers are doing well. They're doing well. And private equity hedge funds are doing well. Let me give you one example about how they are involved with the Conservative Party. In 2011, the contract to run NHS Hinchingbrook Hospital in Cambridgeshire was awarded to Circle, a company part-owned by hedge funds run by 3 of Cameron's biggest donors. What's happening is that there is a recovery. The bankers, it's for the private sector who are being brought in to run the NHS. All of these people are friends of the Conservatives and donate to them. And as Councillor Hemingway and others have said, 50% of the Conservatives' income in the 2010 general election was from the finance sector. What we've got is a government that's in hock, Madam Mayor, to the private sector. And that is the reason the party opposite today, the Conservative Party, will not support a very measured resolution that says we should not be using public money to subsidise these grossly inflated salaries of 4 to 6 million, and on top of that, these very same people are wanting a bonus. Madam Mayor, I'm actually pleased today that Councillor Walsh and the Conservatives have put this amendment down. It gives us the chance to let the people of Wakefield know exactly what these people stand for, what this party stands for, and we need to make sure that, as this is a matter of public record, we let as many residents in this district know as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Yeah.
A point of order, please. You said that Councillor Box was winding up. My understanding of the Constitution is that when an amendment either fails or succeeds, the original motion will then get debated. Now, you've asked him to wind up, therefore, it would appear that there's not going to be a debate. Is this the new democracy of Wakefield?
It was debated. It was debated. Yes, it was.
Madam Mayor, it was the amendment that was debated, not the motion.
Madam Mayor, I have to say that I thought it was quite clear what you said to Council. I thought we all understood that after the amendment had been defeated, that you then made it clear that I was speaking to wind up. Nobody at that time, Madam Mayor, made any comment either on this side or on that side. What we have, Madam Mayor, is a clear attempt by Councillor Hopkins to try and disrupt the proceedings of this council chamber because he was not alert enough to speak when he should have done. And I hope that you will not allow him to get away with this disruption.
Madam Mayor.
Councillor Hopkins, I haven't asked you to speak. I'm now going to show all those in favour of this motion. Show of hands, please. Do you want to go for the recorded vote, Councillor Box?
I think we have sufficient information. Madam Mayor, to let the people of Wakefield know on the amendment.
Thank you. Please show those against. Against the original motion that was first put forward. Yes. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
We've lost. We've lost.
This motion is now carried. Oh, yes. Any abstentions, please? Doesn't appear to be. Motion is carried. Yes, Councillor Holliday.
Madam Mayor, before you leave the chamber, I'd just like to say this.
We've got another motion to come forward.
No,
It's not a new agenda. Oh, yes. Right. Can I have quiet, please?
Order, order.
In accordance with the Council Procedure Rule 18.8, Councillor Stokes has indicated he wishes to withdraw his motion. Councillor Stokes, is that correct? Thank you, Councillor Stokes. Can I have quiet, please?
Order.
I agree to the request. We now move to the Councillor Walsh's motion, which is set out on page 3 of the Council summons. Councillor Walsh, would you please move your motion to Council?
Madam Mayor, I think I'm going to make life very easy. I'm delighted to see the amendment that's been put forward by the Deputy Leader of the Council. It's really great to see that she's actually lining up with my motion. So, in principle, I'm going to be very, very comfortable in saying that the small businesses of the district will really appreciate whole council support. I mean, it's interesting that when we inquired as to what initiatives, what work were going to take place, council officers couldn't actually tell us. So it's really great to see how the Labour Party is really becoming very supportive of Small Business Saturday. So I'm happy to allow Councillor Jeffrey to move forward.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Is this motion seconded?
It's great to see political solidarity.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I will second the motion, and perhaps I'd better speak now, otherwise Councillor Box might find a reason to
Yes,
stop me.
you are learning fast.
Madam Mayor, I'm not only glad to second the motion, I'm also very pleased to say I welcome the amendment that's been moved by the majority party opposite. And the Saturday, what do they call it?
Small Business Saturday.
Sorry, yes, was first of all introduced in America, and I think it's only fair to recognise that the shadow employment minister did say that he thought it ought to be taken up in this country. And it was taken up by all parties, so much so that it was said that it wouldn't be a party political event. It was coming from the grassroots, and it had support all over the country. It's when you look around and you see what's happening in the rest of the country that makes me just wonder what was happening in Wakefield. Because, again, going on the website, you see that various councils across the country have been doing things from having free parking to having special events and making sure that people do their local shopping on December the 7th. So I thought, well, we might as well find out, how has Wakefield Council promoted this? So I went on the Wakefield Council website this morning and I put in the full phrase, which I'm never remembering, Saturday, small business Saturday, and I put in specific. I wanted to know what was Wakefield Council saying. Back came the reply, nothing. If this motion had not been moved by the Conservative group today, I doubt if a lot of the people of Wakefield would have been aware that the Small Business Saturday was happening. And certainly the council and the Labour group opposite who said, I'm glad you're welcoming this Labour initiative, they probably wouldn't have done anything because we're so close to December the 7th that there was very little time for the council to do anything about it. At least you had a week from the motion going in to make sure that the council officers did something to promote Saturday, December the 7th as the Small Business Saturday. But you haven't even bothered to do that. So, you complain about what we think about the things that you say. You think you can read our minds. Perhaps I can read your minds. You're not that bothered about small businesses because you didn't do anything to promote the Small Business Saturday until it was put to you by the Conservative group. So I support both the motion and the amendment.
Councillor Box.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If the Conservative group opposite were so concerned, they would have obviously spoken to Councillor Jeffrey privately and said, look, there's an issue with communication. One of the things that this council has done very successfully over the last few years is to work closely with our business partners. Indeed, twice, I think in the last 4 years, we have been voted the best small city to do business with by the private sector itself. We have the only local enterprise partnership in West Yorkshire, chaired by the private sector at our insistence, that links directly into the City Region Enterprise Partnership.